Should you buy Cyberpunk 2077 in 2022? This is my third review on Cyberpunk 2077 and will be my last unless something major happens in a year or two. Cyberpunk 2077 for me has been an absolute roller coaster over the last few years. I've gone from really liking it to thinking it's just mediocre to then really loving it again. It's one of those games that can leave you feeling completely different on each playthrough, and I think I've found the right balance for me, so this is why it's my final review unless something really does happen in a year or two, which I really doubt. Cyberpunk 2077 released in an absolutely awful state, full of bugs, broken mechanics, and overall was just an absolute mess, but under that I found a game I really enjoyed, and a story that may not be unique but is told in a very unique way within a world focused on, well, cyberpunk. So let's talk about this game that left many people disappointed at launch, and let's find out if Cyberpunk 2077 is finally the game we were all promised in 2022. We'll be talking about the story and gameplay with minimal spoilers. And as much as I'd love to talk about Cyberpunk, there is another game we have to talk about. Let's see if you can guess what game this is. It has global PvP, it has massive PvE battles. I'd give you 3 guesses, but you probably already know what I'm talking about. It is indeed Raid Shadow Legends. Now, you've probably already heard about Raid Shadow Legends. I think everyone has. You know, it's got a ton of champions, over 600 now, but it's got an insane variety of bosses too. So let's show you one of these bosses. This is just one of the bosses. There are loads of bosses in Raid Shadow Legends, and this one specifically has terrible breath and a host of debuffs. The idea is to work as a team to take this guy down. But wait, here's the big news. Later this month, Raid is giving everybody's favourite champion the upgrade he deserves. You might have seen his struggle for awesomeness in some of Raid's hilarious videos, but finally, Death Knight is becoming a legendary champion. Now, why should you get into Raid right now? Well, Raid's got a non-stop schedule of special events and activities, including Forge Pass Season 3 with some amazing rewards on offer, including a limited edition artifact set. If that's not enough, Raid's bringing out some new champions as well, along with some awesome looking champion skins. So there's never been a better time to get into a raid. So if you click on the link down in the description down below, you'll get access to rewards worth $30. These rewards will only be available for the next 30 days and only for new players. We're talking about a free champion, 200k silver, 1 energy refill and 1 XP boost, as well as 1 ancient shard, so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in game. Thank you for sponsoring the video, Raid Shadow Legends. Thank you all for the support on the Fall of Cybertron video I made a few weeks back. I never expected it to do as well as it did, and I do plan to make videos on much older games, so hopefully you stick around for that. As I mentioned in my previous reviews, I think Cyberpunk's story is a mixed bag. Cyberpunk 2077 has some incredible moments throughout this 15 to 20 hour story. Cyberpunk tells a story about the meaning of life, what it means to be human, what even is a human in some cases, while it also brings in some real world criticisms of capitalism and all that stuff. You know, the typical Cyberpunk stuff. Capitalism tends to be one of those critiques that is always pushed into Cyberpunk, but it is not as prevalent in this game, but it's still there. All in all, the story is kind of a jumbled mess. The first 2 hours of Cyberpunk, you go from some nobody meeting up with the character Jackie Wells, only for a cutscene to play and completely skip your rise in the criminal underworld of Cyberpunk. The pacing is off and the structure of the story never seems to be set in stone. Characters are all fantastic in my opinion. These characters may not work for everyone, but I personally really like them. Most of them anyway. Especially the character like Johnny Silverhand that's played by Keanu Reeves, along with Judy, Panam, Jackie Wells, Misty, as well as the Outer Calders, and of course, I can never pronounce his goddamn name. Takimura? Takimura? I've played this game like 3-4 times, I still can't get his name right. It's just, it's embarrassing at this point.
Saul dressed the guy down head to toe for messing with the family. Hell, he didn't send him on any jobs for a year.
Gee, really consoling. Thanks. You said yourself you didn't need any.
There was a great deal of care put into the writing of these characters, and while it may not always stick the landing, it gets close enough every time, which made me care about these characters a lot. The problem with the story is the pacing and the structure, as well as the fact that Cyberpunk is advertised as a role-playing game, an RPG. Cyberpunk 2077 is a bad RPG when it comes to storytelling. Your optional dialogue choices really don't matter that much apart from 1 or 2 big moments throughout the story, which honestly, that's the only bit that truly affects your final ending, which is decided based on your final choices in the last act of Cyberpunk 2077. The things that do change is the romances you decide to go for, or the characters you stick around. That's pretty much it. They appear and then they disappear. It really depends on, those are your choices basically. Don't hop into Cyberpunk expecting The Witcher 3 levels of dialogue, choice, and consequences. Cyberpunk 2077 would have been much better off as just another open world story driven game, which I hate saying because I'm pretty tired of those games, but I do think it would have streamlined the entire game, which would have provided a better experience overall. I have no idea what happened behind the scenes when it comes to the development of Cyberpunk 2077, but it was clearly a mess and there was a lack of direction for the most part. The story, while a bit of a mess, provides enough memorable and powerful moments for me, so I can confidently say you won't have a bad time if you're hopping in for a decent 15 to 20 hour story. Now I know a lot of people won't agree with me on that point, so do check out other reviews other than mine to decide if you do want to buy Cyberpunk 2077 in 2022. Now years can go by, but the story will never be changed, even after updates, so let's talk about the things that have actually changed in 2022, and that involves gameplay and bugs.
Unless you got a better one, like I said, go fuck yourself!
Now, thanks to the next-gen update that released a few months back, gameplay has been improved quite a bit. On previous playthroughs, hit registry felt rough, AI seemed extremely dumb, and overall there was a lot of broken aspects like damage output, and a few other issues, but those issues popped up every now and then, so I'm happy to say it feels like those issues have been fixed in my playthrough. Hit registry feels so much better now, and when you pop a headshot off, it finally feels like I'm playing as a guy or a woman with a badass pistol, rifle, or sniper, and I just hit one of the sexiest, bloodthirsty, absolutely mental 360 no-scope 1220 headshot that the world has ever seen, and that's great to see. Weapons all feel useful in their specific classes, SMGs feel effective at close to mid-range, shotguns feel powerful and sound great, rifles are effective at medium and long range, and the pistols are just so sexy, man. Bugs are less invasive, although some still pop up, especially visual bugs, which honestly I'm not too bothered by. Most games still have these bugs, even Red Dead Redemption 2, one of the most polished games ever, has those bugs every now and then. Sure, it shouldn't happen as often as it does with Cyberpunk, but I personally can let it slide and have a good laugh when I see them. Stealth is really bad though. There are still no level indicators on enemies, so if you do try to do stealth, you really are just going to have to wing it and hope a guy doesn't spot you or your bullet does enough damage. Cyberpunk also falls victim to the classic one guy spots you and everyone is on alert trend for stealth, which sucks, but honestly I'd recommend you not playing stealthily. Go in with a samurai sword, a shotgun with some cybernetic upgrades, and just play it like Doom. You'll have a way better time. Cyberpunk 2077 is still not a flawless experience, but it's way more fun now that these updates have come out. Performance overall on PC seems to be improved significantly, and next-gen consoles are locked at 60 FPS, which is great. And yes, I'm still calling PS5 and Xbox Series X next-gen because it seems a lot of people still can't find any in stock. May have a surprise about that in a few months. Even after all the updates, the side missions though are still pretty mediocre. A lot of them are just filler. There are specific side missions you can do that are they do tell you that they're more branched out, they've had more care put into them, and they're not just fodder. But at the end of the day, the side missions are still pretty mediocre at best. Weapon customization is pretty good. It's not the best I've ever seen, but it's okay. Could have been better. And weapon variety itself, I mean, you have snipers, you have pistols, you have shotguns, but there seems to be only like 1 or 2 types of each weapon, which I can't confirm because I tend to stick with like specific weapons on every playthrough. But it's okay. It's not the best in the world. It's passable. It's passable. It's average. You also have perks, skill trees, all of that good stuff that you expect from an RPG. Once again, it's not the best I've ever seen, but it's passable. Overall, Cyberpunk 2077 has gone from a buggy mess at launch to an okay mess a year after its launch, and now after the next-gen updates, it's become a game with a decent story and slightly better than average gameplay, with the stealth seriously holding it back. The stealth is just really bad. I think if you have a next-gen console and want to give it a shot, absolutely do it. A lot of people love this game despite the various issues with it, but if you still are on PS4 and Xbox One, I'd say avoid it until you manage to upgrade for a much better experience. PC players like myself, if I used to have a GTX 1070 with an i7 4790K and I managed to hit 50 to 60 FPS consistently at 1080p even before the update, so if you're still waiting to upgrade from a 1070 or potentially 1060, you can still have a good time with Cyberpunk 2077. You'll just have a couple frame drops every now and then, and you'll be playing at 1080p, which it's not awful. I don't know why people don't like 1080p. It's not awful, guys. If you have any beefier rigs like an RTX 2070, 3060 with a decent CPU, then, you know, you're going to run Cyberpunk just fine. I do think you should buy Cyberpunk 2077 if that sounds like you. If it doesn't sound like you, I'd avoid it. That's just me though. You should check out other reviews, and thank you for watching.